From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon and welcome to the African and Middle Eastern Division of the Library of Congress. I'm delighted to see you all, especially on this occasion. I'm Mary Jane Deeb, Chief of the Division, and we are here, the African Middle East Division, which is made up of 3 sections: the African section, the Near East section, the Hebraic section. We're responsible for materials from 78 different countries of the world, in the Near East, Central Asia, the Caucasus, as well as the entire continent of Africa, North and Sub-Saharan. And we're very active in acquiring, developing collections, briefing visitors coming from all over the world and from the United States, organizing programs, symposia, and workshops. We also invite scholars and experts who have researched and done work in our areas of responsibility to share with us their insights and their findings, so that all of us attending and participating in these programs leave enriched with new information and a better understanding of the cultures and societies whose publications we collect. The division also participates in celebrating broader programs, such as this one, Black History Month, but also Jewish American Heritage Month, Women's History Month, Nowruz, the Persian-speaking world's New Year, and others. So today we have with us Tambra Raye Stevenson, who has agreed to celebrate Black History Month at the Library of Congress. Thanks to Laverne Page, area specialist in the African section of this division, and in cooperation with the LC Cooking Club and the Daniel Murray African American Culture Association, we're bringing you this very special program on Pan-African cuisine, the healing secrets of the continent, followed by light refreshments, the smells of which you may have wafted in this room already. We have that in our conference room. But now may I introduce Laverne Page, who has made this program possible. Laverne.
First, can you hear me? I have to read something to you about the video recording of this event. It's being video recorded by the Library of Congress. There will be a short question and answer period at the end of the event. If you decide to participate in that activity, you are giving us permission to include your question or comments in future webcasts and broadcasts. At this time, I'd like to ask you to turn off any cell phones or electronic devices that might interfere with the recording of this event. I, too, would like to welcome you to this Black History Month event at the Library of Congress, which is coordinated, as Mary Jane said, by 2 staff organizations, the LC Cooking Club, of which I'm the interim president, and the Daniel A.P. Murray African American Cultural Association, and the president is Larry Surratt, and the program chair is Darren Jones. It's a very active organization. As well as being the president of the Cooking Club, I'm responsible in the African section for Southern Africa and the Portuguese-speaking countries in Africa. Our duties in the African section are principally 4: reference services, collection development, interpreting the collections, and outreach. Programs like this develop from all 4 duties. A few years ago, I was speaking to a colleague from South Africa who said something to me about your Black History Month, which surprised me because it implied that in her country, or where she lived at the time, there was a different Black History Month. And also, I had always used the term African American History Month. So I looked it up to find out what we were both talking about and discovered that Black History Month is an annual observance not only in the United States, but also in Canada and in the United Kingdom for remembrance of important people and events in the history of the African diaspora. In the US and Canada, it's celebrated in February, and in the UK, it is annually celebrated in October. I have never observed a diaspora celebration of Black achievement and remembrance, but I think that that would be very enlightening to do so. And speaking of the diaspora, that brings me to today's program, which will address food and traditions, not only here in the United States, but also on the African continent. Our speaker is Mrs. Tambra Raye Stevenson, a nutritionist who works locally in Washington, D.C. She received a bachelor's degree in human nutrition pre-medical sciences and a master's in health communication. She is the founder of Nativsol Kitchen, a mission of which is to empower people to create new kitchen traditions and to heal families one meal at a time. She also works with the DC Mayor's Office on African Affairs and the Oldways Preservation Trust, African Heritage and Health Advisory Committee. So I'd like to welcome Tambra Raye to come and enlighten us and to empower us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I first just want to thank Ms. Page and everyone for being here today and allowing me to be here to share information with you from my recent travels from Africa and also just my passion around this topic. So let's get started. So most recently, I actually had traveled to Ethiopia, where they had greeting me in the airport actually was a big banner saying, "I am Africa, this is my century." And I think it really speaks to the enlightenment, the hope that people have in terms of many expats that are looking to return back to the continent and make a difference in terms of the rebuilding of Africa and the rebuilding of their economy. However, part of my focus today being a nutritionist is that knowing the power of a triple bottom line, that people, planet, and profit, they all matter. And so as we build economies, we also have to recognize that we need to build their health. Because whatever economies that you create will end up paying for the cost of health if it's not factored into new business development there. So in 2013, I actually had an opportunity to meet with the personal chef of Nelson Mandela when she traveled here to promote her new cookbook, which was The Taste of Nelson Mandela's Kitchen. So it was an awesome opportunity to meet with his daughters on Winnie's side. And I really wanted to highlight this quote because it really speaks to why I'm doing what I'm doing and how that food history is also a part of Black history. And the quote is, "As we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same." And it took a lot for me to come to the point of willing to be a social entrepreneur and create Nativsol Kitchen, which has a tagline of coming back home. And it speaks on so many levels of coming back home, not only to home in terms of cuisine, mama, love, in this instance, Africa, but the idea of coming back to the source of where we all began, where we find our own sense of healing. And so in the area of nutrition, a lot of trailblazing opportunities are available, and one that I found for me is recognizing the need to add the cultural element into foods, especially because of the diverse African diaspora just within the Washington, D.C. area alone. So everyone's culture, in my opinion, is a part of their medicine and healing as well. So as Ms. Page alluded about Nativsol, this actually is my little ruby rose. And she represents the future that I speak about, the need to reclaim our heritage, to restore our health in order for us to build a sustainable legacy for our future. It's so vitally important that our food is part of our future, and the need to preserve our traditions will be a part of our healing process. And so I wanted to highlight this little boy who's 7 years old, who I befriended while in Ethiopia. And I love asking kids wherever I meet them in different parts of the world, so what's your favorite food? And so can you guess what he might actually say, what his favorite food is? He lives in Addis, by the way. Pasta? Spices? Injera, you would think, right? Pizza, burgers, Western food, nothing Ethiopian. So obviously, I'm just like devastated. We're not in America. We're more than 7,000 kilometers away, only to hear burgers and fries again. So what does this say about us? If our food and our nutrition were fingerprints left and an anthropologist were to discover, what would it say about our area in terms of what we believe in, our philosophy, our values? And mind you, we're on another part of the world. So it just goes to show how small our world is becoming in terms of making an imprint with food, and how so important people can displace their own value and their heritage by believing that something else is better. And historically, Africa has been one of those lost food landscapes that has not been a part of the international landscapes. And I've seen this when I've gone to specialty food shows like Fancy Food, and Africa being only a sliver, as if it was just Gambia within the sea of the football stadiums of food, and then Italy takes up more than half, like a food mafia. So I think it says a lot in terms of the continent being so large. How can it only contribute such a small part to our overall international food world? So a lot of opportunity is here as we expand economic opportunities in Africa, but also as it relates to health and nutrition as well. So the problem, as was painted by our little friend, is that the standard American diet is truly contributing to diet-related diseases, diabetes skyrocketing, known by World Health Organization as well as here in the US, as well as kidney disease and cancer and heart disease. And when we think about the continent and healthcare infrastructure, very few countries can be able to handle the issues that come with lifestyle diseases. As expats come, create new opportunities, they also bring their taste of Western foods and create those same food landscapes in their homeland. But once again, where are the opportunities to remedy the issues and recognize we need to keep our heritage intact? So the opportunity, as I serve on advisor with the African Heritage and Health Program with Oldways, is recognizing that preserving our traditions is so vitally important in order to maintain our health. And those are the soft savings that we see when it comes to economics, which are just as vitally as important. So this is just one of the programs that I provide here locally, and it was crafted by Oldways. In 2011, they actually launched the African Heritage Diet Pyramid, and it was the first of its kind, really, and it really is an answer to what has occurred over the last few years, which is really demonizing soul food. Soul Food Junkies was one documentary that highlighted the issues combating in the African American community here in the US, but really those issues are going to be seen around the world. But the question is it truly the soul food in terms of the collard greens and the chicken and sweet potatoes that's the problem, or is it really the convenient bodegas and corner stores that are littering the communities as the real concern? So I find that the answer to this is really looking at the pre-colonial African diet that had many of the staple items that were carried along the slave ships to the US, but prepared in a way that actually is far more healthy, has less meat and more fruits and vegetables and grains. So we'll explore that in today's presentation as well. So recognizing when family members is mine, my grandma, both my grandmas had diabetes, had heart disease in my family, my dad, my granddad. And the question is that really a part of my heritage? Many people will say, well, it just runs in the family. Well, I was in Ethiopia, I saw no obese people, none at all. So how did that happen? So the real answer is it's lifestyle, and how do we address these lifestyle issues and own that? And so one of the real dilemmas and challenges when we have countries struck by poverty, having a little extra junk in the trunk becomes one of the glorified things. And more people find that, well, if you have a little bit of fat, it's okay. But how far do you go in saying when you cross the line when it becomes unhealthy? And that's where we as nutritionists address those issues. So I had an opportunity to meet the former Nigerian President Obasanjo, who once chaired the African Union and who brought me there in terms of a youth employment in Africa summit that was a part of the overall African Union summit. So it was a great opportunity to be able to speak, provide recommendations around how to address youth employment issues. And for me, that was in the case of ag, food, and health sectors, and the need to create pipelines of diversity when a lot of times, once again, is not really factored into the need to create opportunities for youth. But the African Union just this year actually declared 2014 as the year of agriculture and food security. So when everywhere else in the world understands that the 60% of arable land in Africa is ripe time to create more ag opportunities for them, Africans also have to see the need to see the value in their own land as well. So this was me giving a talk, giving my recommendations at the Youth Employment in Africa Summit. And so it was a great opportunity to meet other, really my generation around the continent who also is very passionate about their country, about the issues, to help provide youth opportunities, because just like UNCF says, a mind is a terrible thing to waste. When you create economic opportunities, it actually provides more national security opportunities as well, because an idle mind is something that we don't want to have on the continent. So put young people to work is so important. So this was a snapshot of all of us coming together after African Union heads a state luncheon. Chair Zuma is in the middle next with Obasanjo. And so it was a great opportunity at the luncheon to provide our recommendations to all the heads from the African nations about how do we actually address these issues with youth, and how that employment opportunities across a variety of sectors is so important and so needed on the continent. So I wanted to start off with segue into a quote of why I'm passionate about food and cooking in our homes. If you've seen some of the articles and news pieces about what's happening in restaurants, it actually just convinces you need to get back in the kitchen as quickly as possible, because you should know what's being cooked in the kitchen, otherwise you might eat a forbidden food, and we've seen that in the headlines a lot around here. So I wanted to highlight the state of the African diaspora in America. The U.S. Census in 2005 committed a survey looking at the diversity within the African American population, and recognizing that in the D.C. area alone, and that includes the Metro Washington area, that we have more than 100,000 African-born immigrants here, representing 11% of the total immigrant population. And so when we also look at the issues that they face in adopting a Western diet, we find research shows within 5 years their health starts to deteriorate. A lot of that, some may say, ties into racism. Also, it's adopting Western lifestyles, switching some of the whole grain products with more refined grain products, and then adopting more convenient food as well. So all these are factors that are really important to recognize, that when I think about patients who come into the hospital and looking for nutrition counseling, what kind of counseling are they going to receive that's culturally appropriate, instead of being non-compliant, as some may note, and find them back into the hospital for diabetes, heart disease, or cancer. So I truly believe that food justice is the next human and civil rights issue in our century. And part of that is not just about access and affordability of food, but also access to cultural foods as well. Right here in the DC metro area, we have African crops being grown through the U.S. Department of Agriculture Ethnic Crops Program. So we do have someone here today that can talk more about it, but it's so important to know that right at University of the District of Columbia, crops are being grown that are African vegetables, and the need to have more access to fresh fruits and vegetables that are related to the continent is so important. It's not just about access in terms of, oh, it gives me nostalgia of home. It's understanding nutritionally those foods are actually going to be more medicinal to you because your body, your ancestral DNA, memory DNA knows those foods. So they're going to be acclimated far better than eating foods that are not necessarily have been a part of your heritage. So that's why it's so important to recognize that if we can have bok choy, can we have some jute leaf? So it brings us into resurrecting the soul in the food. When we think about soul food, a lot of people just think collard greens, cabbage, mac and cheese, fried chicken, but really it was about the love that the woman, mainly it was a woman in the kitchen cooking, put into the dish to make the meal. And really in many African countries, it's kind of seen a little bit disrespectful if you overstep your boundaries and takes on a woman's role. And that was her domain. I feel the same way in my own kitchen. So, and they can take care of the bank accounts too, you know? So that's your domain. So I find that it's so important to realize that this energetic value that goes into food is not simply, oh, what we see on these different food and cooking shows about, oh, you can come up with this awesome recipe. No, it's about what is the state of the mind and the heart of the person who is actually preparing that food, because their energy is transferred into that. And we know that even from an artist standpoint, when we see a piece of art and it moves us just like a piece of music, is because of there was energy, there was passion that was put into that piece that you feel, and it connects to you on a vibrational level. And to me, that has become missing a part of all the hoopla about food in America, the spiritual element and the communal piece that's so vitally important, and that was the secret sauce when it came to African foods. So I just want to bring about how did this spirituality get lost in the process. As we know, it was all about economics. And so human bodies and guns and rum and everything else was swapped back and forth through this triangle between the continent and the Americas. And so in the process of that, a lot of the history of what the food meant kind of got lost. And some could say, was it intentional, non-intentional? The bottom line, it happened. And so it took time to try to resurrect that. And so we started to feel the soul of the food when we had women who worked with what they could in the kitchen, scraps or whatever, and made it happen. And a lot of times it was simply a lot of plant-based foods, maybe just a pot of greens with a little piece of meat, and as long as you had that, you had enough protein. Now it's become a side dish, and then we have a plate just full of chicken on the other side. So it's about creating that balance again. So it's all about reclaiming the traditional foods that we need to do. As you see in this dish, from a nutrition standpoint, we have the black-eyed peas with the rice together make a complete protein, and then we have okra, and we have spinach, and then we have a soup. So when you think about the My Plate by USDA, this is a balanced plate. But you ask someone today, like, where's the meat? So this is where I'm talking about how far we've come when meat was such kind of like a luxury item that people go goo goo gaga over it, and now they just want meat all over the plate where it just falls off. If you don't have enough, you know, that's a problem. So the question is, what is enough? So I just want to go into the importance of preserving the wisdom. We have a number of books that have been coming through, even as of late 2014, Afro-Vegan by Brian Terry, recognizing the importance of plant-based diets within the African community is part of the heritage, and knowing that documenting that history is so important, along with the nutrition element. As Jessica Harris, who's another advisory member with me on Oldways African Heritage and Health Program, Africa cookbook, she notes the importance of the need to capture that nutrition information. Right now, if you look through many cookbooks, very few will have that information. But part of the competitive edge in the landscape around African foods is recognizing that people are looking to food from a health perspective. So if you can show the value that it actually is going to improve my health, then I might be okay in spending a few extra dollars for something that is actually going to be beneficial for me nutritionally and culturally for me as well. So this is many things to think about when we're thinking about new books to produce as authors, and also the importance of what books do we value in our libraries and in our homes. So this is a snapshot of the African Heritage Diet Pyramid. At the base, it's all about family and community. When we think about, I remember there was a Somali talk here not too long ago, and the speaker had mentioned how women would come together, they would cook together, potluck style, they would talk. All of that element, that's a part of the energy exchange happening, and we've kind of lost that. We're in our own homes, we cook separately, and then we just eat our meals, sometimes alone. And food is very social, and that's why so many people eat out. So part of what the work that I do is teaching cooking classes where we're creating community. It actually is more community empowerment, and we happen to use food. And in the end, we all come together in a potluck and we cook together and we bring dishes and we bring family, we bring friends. That is so important. So after that is the greens becomes the base. And the traditional pyramid that you've seen by USDA has been grains. But that's not the case when it comes to African heritage foods. After the greens, you're going to find tubers, you're going to find vegetables, and you're going to find fruit, all equilibrium. A lot of times when it comes to desserts, fruit becomes the dessert. It's not cakes and ice creams that you find in the Western world. And so it was kind of not surprising because the role of Italy played in Ethiopia, but there was a lot of pastry shops, and I was just like, is this really the best thing to have? So as you see, the desserts from the West are really at the top of the pyramid. And in some cultures, if you introduce anything kind of like white product, like dairy or sugar, that really is seen taboo in their kitchens. And so it really does speaks to the variety of subcultures within the food world in Africa, and the importance of recognizing that on the coastal lines, you're going to have people eating more fish and seafoods. Interior, it might be a little bit more red meats, but it's going to be very few, and it's going to be more grains and vegetables more than anything else. And for anyone who loves plantains, they are not in Ethiopia. So where's the data on all of this? So actually, there was a study done just recently over the past year looking at what I call the African food swap. So they actually took a group of African Americans in Ohio area and then South Africans, Zulu actually, and had them swap out their diets. Now what was so awesome about swapping out their diets was seeing who fared better off health-wise. Can you guess who fared better off in swapping out the Zulu diet with the African American diet? And you know what they're eating in Ohio. Well, when it came to the porridge that's eaten in South Africa, mainly made of maize, it's actually was far better for the African Americans eat the Zulu diet. They actually had more fiber, they had less fat, less refined carbs in their diet, and so they actually were able to fight off the cancer preventively. And so it really does speak to the importance of how much diet plays a role in our overall health. Another one. This actually is also East Africa, and it just looked at folks in that area. There was no, swapping among cultures, but there was a swap in terms of having these group of folks eat Western foods such as donuts, ice cream instead of their fish that they ate from the lake, and then some of the fresh green vegetables that they've had. And when you swap things out like that in terms of Western food for the traditional food, you also start seeing a deterioration in health. So what happened was they actually started to create metabolic syndrome, which for anyone who understands, that's about inflammation. It's the start of what we start seeing with diabetes. So when we think about how much we want to satisfy that sweet tooth or that emotional feeling that we have when we're stressed and we're bugged out from work, then we have to start thinking about, well, what things do you go to in form of comfort food? And in the West, a lot of times it's going to be the donuts, the ice cream, the cakes, the $5 sale at the grocery store, and you pick it up and you don't think about it. Over time, how does that play a role into your overall health? So healing secrets. In the mainstream nutrition world, these oils would not be on the table. And that's why I'm a big advocate and a defense of tropical oils, red palm, coconut, because number one, the red palm, it actually has high in vitamin E and keratin, very similar to what you find in any foods that are in the color zone of orange and reds. It's all about color. And a lot of times they're stigmatized as saturated fats, which cannot be on the same level of saturated fats found in animal products. They have different fatty acid chains. Same with when it comes to coconut oil. One of the controversies with palm is sustainability issues, where it's sourced either in Southeast Asia, where deforestation is happening, but it's more sustainable and suitable in Africa. So now you can actually find fair trade red palm oils in grocery stores in this area where they're being sourced from Africa and where people are being paid well, and at the same time you're having an oil. Everything obviously is in moderation, not a whole cup of oil, but a small few tablespoons and blended with another oil if necessary. So the oils are known to have good heart health implications. The other element to this is meat. How much meat is enough? In most African countries, having either fish, tilapia is a big one, but these days a lot of it's farm raised, which is not necessarily the best option. Typically wild caught is better. The same when we think about picking salmons. So it's all about having fish in your diet, a good source of omega-3 fatty acids that balance the omega-6 that we find in a lot of Western foods. That is the goal. Everything is about balance, and that's how disease happens, is when you have too much of one thing and it tapers off and you create a dis-ease in the body. So today I actually have these in the form of juice for you to try, tamarind and baobab. Baobab, like many items that come into the U.S. by FDA, has to be in powder form. They can't be in raw form. So when it comes to tamarind and baobab, baobab is a very secret tree in Africa. It's kind of like if you've ever seen the movie Avatar and what the tree meant to the people, that's how the baobab, it not only provides shelter, food, it has almost like living wisdom trapped within the trunk of the tree. So baobab is a special tree, and not only that, it has a good source of vitamin C, calcium, iron, and magnesium. And when we're thinking about healthy immune systems, when we're thinking about muscles, fighting off free radicals, so important to have these items included in our diet. So part of creating African food opportunities in America and abroad is having that consumer demand, bringing awareness to know it is available. Actually, a local company in Maryland actually produces these items, sources everything from West Africa, and sells them in Europe and America as well. So what is happening these days to a lot of African foods is they're seen as specialty foods, which actually creates more opportunity in terms of price and also perceived value, where before they were seen as just hunger foods. So that's not becoming the case any longer now. And when it comes to whole grains, this is a very important topic because a lot of times Americans tend to have a lot of corn, soy, wheat, refined rice in their diet. And so the need to vary that up is so important, especially for those who have gluten intolerance issues. A lot of African grains will naturally be gluten-free. Case in point is millet and sorghum. In America, we actually feed it to birds, but in my heritage, which I trace back to the Fulani tribe in northern Nigeria, millet is a key staple in their diet, and it's called many different names and is brought to India as well and can be found in some communities in East Africa. But Nigeria is one of the top producers of sorghum, of millet in the West African region. And so it's high in protein, which helps for those who think they need to have more meat, that there's enough plant-based proteins available where meat should be simply used as a condiment and just topped off on a dish versus being a mainstay. And then sorghum is another grain that's going to be gluten-free, high in protein, and actually a lot of Midwest farmers right now are growing sorghum, and there are organic grain companies in the U.S. growing both. So they are already available in the markets and is another opportunity for African crops to be perceived as having a nutritional value for those who are having gluten issues, with the additional vital gluten added to wheat products when it already has gluten in it, which is causing a lot of gluten issues for people with celiac. Next is the greens, okra. They were used by the queens of Egypt to help produce radiant skin, and it's so important to recognize that okra, it can be made not slimy, by the way. So I always say, don't blame the vegetable, blame the cook. And so okra is one of those friends of ours that is going to be high in vitamin C and K and have a good source of B complex vitamins. When you think of people who are moody, they're the ones who are eating the donuts and the ice cream. It creates a vicious cycle, like a codependency. So it's so important to realize that foods such as our green leafy vegetables are going to be high in vitamin Bs, which is what we need for our moods, very much so. So we will definitely be having some greens dishes here today, and also moringa I wanted to highlight. You can actually get it in a tea form actually in the DC area now. It's high in vitamin B6 and vitamin C and A. And in Africa, when we think about babies who need protein, moringa, which is grown just randomly all over the place, is a far better source than a lot of the imported items that are being provided in a form of humanitarian aid. Items that are being grown like moringa can provide that natural protein that the babies need and will be far better off on so many different levels. So that is another item that I've seen crop into the U.S. A lot of people not only having it, because this moringa actually by FDA standards can only be brought in from a powdered form as well. So there's no raw moringa, but I have eaten the seeds, which is a very interesting experience. It's almost like fireworks going off in your mouth, actually. I couldn't believe it. So next, spices. When I meet people of African descent and they say, oh, I don't do spice, I was like, oh my God, what happened to you? Because that is so a part of the culture. And when you think about people who are looking to lose weight, I mean, spices is going to rev that up by 20% in terms of your metabolism. So spices is so important. In Ethiopia, you have the Berber, which is basically a blend of pepper spices that you can find in the Ethiopian markets around here as well. But I love this Hausa proverb, a man is like a pepper until you have chewed it, you don't know how hot it is. And so harissa and other hot peppers are also a good source of vitamin A and C and K. So there are health benefits when we're thinking of a blend of different peppers. Please believe I have peppers today for you in the dishes, so be ready. But we have plenty of drinks as well. So in the end, it's about restoring our families and healing our meals, because when we do this, holistically speaking, we really help the next generation to understand what good traditions look like. As I showed you earlier, the young boy, 7 years old in Addis, who, you know, perceive hamburgers and fries as part of his culture now. But if you were to ask my little 4-year-old Elliot, what does he like? He would say, I like strawberries, and I like nuts, and granola bars, Now, how did that happen? That's intentional. Parents playing an active role, and it's hard out there. It's a jungle because you're competing with so many different voices out there, people, grandparents, babysitters who want to say, well, if your mama's doing this, it's okay that I forgive you that. Like, no, it's not, because to me, food is like a drug. And children, because of the impact it has in creating a magnifying effect in their bodies, their small little bodies, what you think is harmless to give them is not harmless to me in the eyes of nutrition, because I understand the implications that you're setting my child up for long term. And you have to be a strong advocate, and it starts there and it spreads, because if your child is like a little leader like you know and think they are, then they're going to influence their peers and they're going to stand up for what's right. So there's a number of resources out there from Oldways. You can go to their site. Also, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations actually came up with a compilation of West African nutrients, which is so important in thinking about how to factor that information in when you're looking at foods from a vitamin and mineral perspective. Where is that information? So you can actually either get on the listserv. There's a whole listserv for people who manage nutrient databases around the world. And one of the challenges and opportunities that I find here in the U.S. is for the U.S. to invest in more analyzing nutrients of African foods and having that readily available for not only companies but also consumers who are looking to counsel their patients and help in that regard. So African millet is one of the dishes that you will be trying today, and also we can have copies available for you as well if you like it. But it's a great example of a gluten-free dish, vegan, for those who are not into meats and dairies. It should be called the African Pride salad because of the reds and yellows and greens that you'll find. So we'll have a little cooking demo afterwards. So I want to thank the Library of Congress. I want to thank the Cooking Club, the association, for bringing me here. I'll open up for any questions that you have. So thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm curious. You have a son?
And daughter.
And daughter?
Yes.
And they go to school?
Not yet. They're still toddlers.
When they begin to go to school,
yes.
will you be sending them with food that you prepare at home, or will they be eating the school lunches?
Well, it's funny now because I'm already preparing their foods when they go to daycare. So I've already been training myself for the last few years.
You mentioned
Moringa.
That's
A green leaf. A green leafy plant that's kind of grown along the sides of roads in Africa, West Africa in particular.
And how is it prepared as a food item?
Well, some people just eat the leaf. You can, just like how, these days people are into raw diets, cooked whatever. You can have it raw, cooked. Like I said, I found a tea. You can have it in tea. They're now in capsules here in the U.S. So it's a variety of ways. It's no different than thinking about how do we prepare other dishes such as kale or collards or spinach or anything else. Yes, Eve.
Now, about the oils,
yes.
Because, palm oil and coconut oil have gone from villains to
victories. Yeah.
Do you believe that any of it could be tied to lifestyle and the sedentary lifestyle that most people have in the United States, because they talk about it being artery clogging? And then when you look at most African countries, people are so much more active and climate is different, et cetera.
Right.
What's your take?
Yeah, I think there probably could be seen a number of factors on that. I mean, climate, the temperature, all these things work together. So, I mean, that has to be factored in. But at the same time, like today, I'm wearing coconut oil. I find that it has many different purposes, not only internally but externally, but in everything it's about moderation. Too much of anything is not good for you. So yes, the coconut oils, the palm oils, the tropical oils, they play a role, but the other part to this is the processing of those oils. A lot of times hexane is used to extract the oil from the seeds, and so you're introducing a chemical which is obviously not good. So I look for unrefined, naturally expressed oils as possible, organic oils. So it's not only about the product, it's the process that really matters, and the preparation, the 3 Ps. In the back. Okay, so they're at, I guess it's okay to mention stores. So she asked, where can you buy this stuff? So around here, I actually shop everywhere. I'm not loyal to one store or the other. So I will venture out to international markets. H Mart is one. I feel like I'm in another world when I go. It's great. Stuff's cheap, affordable. And then I go to Whole Foods and other kind of like health food stores, moms. It's amazing how if you're kind of like a food hunter like me, you'll find just amazing new products, and my kitchen turns into a food museum real quick. And then also I'll venture out to different ethnic markets. I found a halal Sudanese market in Northern Virginia to get fresh goat versus frozen goat in Maryland. So it really is things that I enjoy doing as a leisure activity that has some benefits, and then be able to partake that information into the classrooms when I teach. The front, yes.
First of all, thank you very much for a very interesting and thought-provoking presentation. I loved it. I wanted to ask you about the preparation of food. Often you read in those books about food and about diets, etc., that the combination of elements is very important. You showed one, the black-eyed pea with the rice, that is so rich and it's a complete food. What other types of combinations are healthy to eat? And what are the combinations that are not healthy to eat together? Items and
Yeah, that could be a whole nother presentation. Food combining, I've actually talked on that before. Combining junk food with good food, that is not a good combination. So I would say when it comes to combinations, it really depends on what the rule. There's no real set rule in some areas. It really is about good food. The example that I gave when it came to whole grains and beans or legumes, that's seen around the world in terms of knowing that nutritionally makes complete protein in terms of essential amino acids. But when it comes to other categories, there's no real hard set rules around that. I mean, there are, when you think about acid and alkaline, you don't want to have too many acidic foods because acid is really the foundation of disease in the body. So in that regard, a lot of high fat meat product, oil, animal-based oils, fried foods, overly refined processed foods, they're going to be more acidic. Sodas, more acidic. So keeping those things at bay as much as possible is going to be really important. And so, I mean, example with my own kids, they drink tea. He loves tea. I make ginger tea, herbal teas, hibiscus tea, and there's no soda allowed, and I stopped juices. So it's just being real adamant about, like, no, you're going to get that exposure later in life. Right now, I need to create the proper foundation, and that's how it begins. Question in the back? Far, yeah. The fiber content of traditional African foods. So when it comes to fiber, particularly in the whole grains, is a great example. As I mentioned, in the West, we refine a lot. We refine, and unfortunately, even in Africa, I was communicating with an Ivorian-based rice company, and I was going back and forth about, well, are you refining the rice? And they didn't really understand what I was talking about, being Francophone. But it was just like, okay, well, let's go through this. Are you removing anything off the grain? It's like, yeah, the yellow stuff, like, okay, that probably should stay on there. So when it comes to grains, it's a great example that when you're removing those elements in terms of the bran and the germ, you're removing fiber and vitamins and minerals. And this is why if you kept whole grains outside, I've done this as an unintentional experiment, bugs start coming. Why? Because they smell the nutrients. If you leave white rice, refined wheat, they're not touching that stuff because there's nothing there. It's just carbohydrates. That's why breads get a bad rap. So being able to eat the whole grains of African food, African grains in particular, is going to be very nutritious. Number one, they're growing in very dry, arid conditions. So think about someone who could survive as a human being in that environment. Can you imagine? That plant must be tough. So that's the kind of food that you want to eat in your body, because if they can withstand anything, they're going to create a good homeland security in your body. And that fiber is going to be really important, like a broom and a dustpan combined with water to sweep the toxins out of the body. Right behind that gentleman, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I got both in my fridge right now. Okay, so food is always going to be the first medicine, supplements after food, okay? They've done studies even in Maine where people who've worked, and I've actually been up to Bar Harbor, those who pick the blueberries on the mountains, who just stay out there even in the sun, they never even got enough sun to get enough vitamin D. So it really is challenging when it comes to vitamin D, but the goal is more exposure as possible. Obviously, you know, it's about balance. Too much of anything, not good. Skin cancer, hello, cover up, put the suntan lotion on or sunscreen on. So it's really important to understand that, yes, the sun is a part of our nourishment, and also the food is part of our nourishment. And then if that can't work for you for maybe budgetary reasons or whatever, then supplement. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we will be tasting some of these dishes.
Of course. Oh, yeah. Indeed. And do any of it have meat in it? Okay, thank you for asking. So obviously I've been highlighting a plant-based diet within African heritage foods. So today what we're featuring is an African millet salad, which is vegan and gluten-free. Also we have what is, well, minus the seeds, I had a substitute, but gomenwa, which is Ethiopian grains, so that's with collards, so that's vegan and gluten-free as well. And then we also have an African black-eyed pea salad, homage to Senegal, and so that also is vegan and gluten-free as well. And then I made home-brewed hibiscus ginger teas, and then we have other teas by Faso Foods, Mariva teas, that juices that are available as well, the baobab, the tamarind that are available. So I have everything ready for you all. It's just a matter of assorting, so to be a mini little cooking demo for you real quick to how do you put these salads together so you can come and taste and see the goodness of African heritage. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So everyone can't fit in, but I'm sure you can peek around or
mingle, talk, build community.
So if we could give her a minute to just go in and take a sip of water and to wash her hands, and then we will go in. And there's enough for everybody, so there's no rush.
And also, as I mentioned, we have Yao Afancho from UDC with the Ethnic Crops Program. If you can stand up, Yao, for those who want to ask questions about African vegetables that are grown locally here in the area, this is the person you should know who once was a Togolese farmer. So thank you, Yao, for coming.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.